Hey, welcome to the Rain and Morale podcast. So, do you ever feel like screaming out in the office, on Zoom, or outside the school gates? For the love of God, come on, really? Then, if this is you and you're looking for an honest, fun, and frank podcast on life and business, then sit back and listen to me, Rain and Morale. I'll be bringing great people on the show to talk, share, and debate their life experiences and business challenges, keeping the show unpolished, but in a fun and unique British style with sarcasm, tenacity, maybe a few swear words or tears. This podcast keeps it real, honest, raw, and removes the bullshit in the only way I know how, through authenticity and getting shit done. Think of it less like the Housewives of New York or Towie with the lipo and drama, and more like the house lives of the real world. I hope you'll take something away to be better informed, laugh, smile, or maybe even finally getting the confidence to shout, come on, really. So enjoy. Hi everyone, welcome to the Rona Morel podcast. Ian, you might just want to mute yourself because I can hear you. So
Thanks,
I
Rona. I'm
am
trying.
That's okay. Listen, this is a bit of a weird podcast, actually, for me. I am delighted to have Sarah Carey with me, all the way from Jersey. And then we've got Sarah Greenfield Clark, who is currently residing in Tenerife, and the fabulous Ian Bell, who is hidden from camera because it's not the most convenient of places. But we're all here really for one reason, and we wanted to use this opportunity on my podcast to just tell a little bit of a story about some of our journeys with Stephen Fern and to help people understand the scale, how long it's been going on, the different types of MOs. And I was really conscious that we didn't want it to be like a one or two woman band, and that there was more people behind this. So to the three of you, thank you so much for coming on and being brave enough and willing enough to talk about this openly. I understand how hard it's been, how challenging it is emotionally, mentally, physically. And yeah, I'll let everyone tell you a little bit about themselves, how they got involved, when they got involved, ultimately what happened. And then hopefully, as we go round everyone, you'll start to see some familiarities, let's put it this way. So thank you all for joining us. Ian, I'm going to actually come to you first, if that's okay. So if you can just come off mute and tell us a little bit about your experience with Stephen, when it started, who else was involved, like any NGOs, things like that, and then what the state of play is now. And then we can go into more details as we go through. So over to you, Ian.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thanks, Rona. Thanks very much, guys. Look, I mean, I think just to give a little bit of context, the amount of wonderful people that have been involved in this sham is actually scary because it's one of the few instances where I've met some of the best, most philanthropic, purpose-driven, high energy, trusting people within my career. Unfortunately, the person who brought us together, kind of by default, Stephen Fern is anything but those things. Um, I met Stephen Fern through one of my banking contacts in Singapore, who I'm still good friends with and is very trustworthy. And we have been working with a film producer in the purpose-driven space to get up a animation for children around saving the planet, basically. And Stephen was introduced as a potential funder, and then he presented his concept. Well, it turns out that it wasn't his concept, other people's concept around the arc. And over time, in good faith, for the first like 4 or 5 months, that long, we then started helping Stephen on the basis that we wanted to help his project get up. His idea was to unlock commercial funds through both brands and investment banks to at huge scale um, basically fund a series of regenerative projects. And during for these kind of projects, there's always a start. It's exactly like the pitch for a movie. It's exactly like a pitch for a piece of ad business. There is a time at the beginning where people aren't being paid if there's a trust circle. So we started helping pull everything together. It then got to the point where it was getting quite serious because it was taking a lot of our time as a business, and we were introducing a lot of very valuable stakeholders. So we then entered into a commercial agreement. I'm looking at the invoice now, and for February, March, and April, it was $120,000 that he personally agreed to pay. February, March, and April, and this is back in 2020. So, bearing in mind that Stephen now still has 900,000 unengaged followers on LinkedIn, and is talking very openly about how the project's going to succeed and how there are haters, but it's all about integrity, etc., etc. Well, I'm looking at my laptop now with a $120,000 invoice from 2020 that hasn't been paid.
Can I ask, Ian, just out of interest, at the time, was there a contract? And if there was one, did he sign it or anything like that?
Yeah, so there wasn't a signed contract, but in professional services, there was an in writing offer, and there was his reply saying agreed, and there was then receipt of estimates that then turned into invoices. So there was in effect a contract, and the estimates that then became invoices upon his approval were then issued to him, and he then wrote back. And when there were issues with non-payment, he for a long time never even disputed the fact that they should be paid or not. He just disputed the fact that it was predetermined on a funding deal, and he was left holding the baby because the funding deal didn't go through. That's actually not true, because these invoices for February, March, and April 2020 were the start of an engagement that was supposed to go on for years and actually have much more significant payments. So the future payments, you could debate saying that they were predicated on a big deal, but originally he was paying discounted fees for us to represent him and help run his business.
Right. And can I ask, have you ever received any money from him?
Yes, we have. We've received a small fraction of funding when we engaged basically where we engaged lawyers, and also started talking to him very firmly, and it would take about 6 or 7 months of weekly arguments with him saying that he's just closing a trade and it would be next week. It was literally death by 1,000 cuts, and then eventually a small figure appears in a bank account when he had obviously been able to get some personal funds to pay it, and then for the next 3 years the same thing then happens against like 80% of the unpaid invoices. Yeah, but we did receive some funds, and even that was farcical, because the funds were, basically the emails said things like, "Oh, I've just papered up a a trade in crypto, and it will be transferred over to fiat shortly,
Yeah.
and then I can pay you in cash, and I can pay you the full amount. And then obviously the full amount doesn't come, and it's a tiny amount. And the correspondence is as such as like, well, the rest will come next week, and then literally 3 years later, still hasn't come.
All right, Ian, lovely. Thank you. And we will come back to you. So thank you for
No
sharing
worries.
that. So essentially 2020, there's a deal, there's a fraction of money, you get lawyers involved, there's a bit of a squeeze, a bit of funds come, but essentially you're still missing all of those monies. And just actually, sorry, Ian, before you go, did you engage or work with any large NGOs? Were any promises made
Absolutely.
via Stephen? And let's come
Absolutely.
back to that. Let's come
Yep.
back to that. I want to see what both Sarah's experience was in terms of that run up. So Sarah Kare, I'm going to come to you next. Ian, if you want to go on mute again, that would be fantastic. It sounds like he's having a whale of a time wherever he is. So Sarah Kare, who is in Jersey, I first met Sarah back in 2021, actually. So over to you, and please just tell us a little bit about your experience. Oh. You just need to come off mute, Sarah.
That's better. Thanks for arranging this and for bringing us together over the last, I can't remember now how many years, because it started for me in 2019, early 2019.
Right.
And I would just say the same as Ian. It's both lovely and sad that so many well-meaning people who care about social and environmental causes have been caught in this disgusting experience, because we should be spending our time on the cause. And that's one of the things that I actually said to the judge when I went to court, which upsets me the most, which is about how this has detracted us from doing the good work that we need to do. So just to add to what Ian has said, that's a massive frustration for me. So I live in Jersey and Stephen lives in Jersey, in different places, apparently. So I didn't meet him in person. Something came up on LinkedIn in early 2019, and it just looked really exciting. He's obviously got a big talent for marketing, writing, and telling big stories about saving the world, saving the planet. And I was very early on in transitioning my career from 15 years in sort of change management into sustainability. I was upskilling, I was doing lots of training, and I was massively, still am, like, passionate, and sort of coming across this opportunity was so exciting for me, and I was full of hope, etc. So I met him, and obviously, again, he's such a good storyteller that I was just completely sucked in, by the subject is so emotive as well. I guess you don't always believe that someone would be disingenuous using a subject like this to profit from people. Let's face it, you just wouldn't expect that, but it happens a lot. So actually one of the first things, so he wanted me to be his project manager, this, that. I was amazing. I could help him do all these things. He had loads of money coming in, to the point where he would say, because I was still in a full-time consulting role, and he would say, when can you quit your job? I need you on board full-time. I mean, I've got in my court bundle, I've got it in front of me now, I've got reams of text messages and emails sort of bigging me up, and stories of lots of funding coming in and all these different companies and deals he was doing. And then, when can you come on board? When can you, so all that. I mean, I was just so excited about all of this. So and again, agreeing with Ian, and it's good that some work is done on trust at the beginning of a relationship, and I think that should continue. Not everyone's like Stephen, but so you do that, and I started that way. But he told me, keep a record of the work you do, the hours. Just make sure you keep a note of everything. That's very important, because money's just literally coming in the next month or two. And so I did exactly that. And the first piece of work he asked me to do was a Jersey thing, actually. I think we forget, because the Ark was such a huge thing that we've all been affected by. Actually, one thing I was very keen on doing was opening an impact hub in Jersey, a co-working space. I've been to many around the world. And he loved that. He wanted it to be for the ARC, so he wanted to call it the ARC Impact Hub or the ARC Hub, or to have a physical co-working space. So I worked on a pitch, actually. I did all the budget side, the finance, like what we would need. And I produced a deck that he said he was going to present to a government minister, who is now the chief minister of Jersey at the moment. I don't know, I'm guessing now he probably never did that meeting. But at the time he said he was. And he also had me go and meet property managers of premises, potential premises. So, you know, I was so excited, but nothing came of that. But I spent a lot of time and work and energy on that part. And then that led into the ARC project, which had many strands to it, for raising funds through reward points for consumer behavior. So buying goods and then having points and then converting them into cash or carbon offsets or whatever. I can't remember it all now. So it was 2019. And again, lots of project management. What was strange, that was, because I'm a project manager, you know, professionally, was that the team was all hidden. He told me, he kept talking about all these people none of us had ever met. So one of the things I wanted to do was put some structure around that. So I'm not the only one, probably. So I tried to sort of put a team site together and get everybody on board. And eventually he started a LinkedIn chat group with about 30 people on it. So I started seeing all the names, and that's when I started seeing the breadth of this. So I want to say that this is global. People from India, people from the US, Australia, you know, Europe, Africa. I mean, so this has many tentacles. And yeah, I carried on trying to work on documents and all sorts of material for this ARC thing. And all the time funding was coming. I guess what was coming up was, I'm trying to remember what year it was, maybe someone can remind me, but I ended up going to
2020, I think, towards the end.
Week, New York, to New York for Climate Week, because a lot of the NGOs, so the other side of this was, there was people like me, and on the other side of this was a bunch of NGOs, large and small, that he was promising the funding to from the ARC products. So he was spinning a yarn for the workers, the team of workers like us lot, I guess. But sadly, on the other hand, he was promising millions to all sorts of NGOs who had social and environmental purpose, you know, behind them. One of the bigger ones was, and we'll come on to, I guess, a list if we want to say stuff, but, you know, Evergreening Alliance, which is huge. So they were going to be in New York at this Climate Week, because I guess it's a huge networking event. And there was going to be panels at the UN. So he hadn't paid me at this time. So I thought, I'm not getting anything out of this. He owes me money. I've put a lot of work in. So I said, right, I want you to pay for a flight and I'll go, because then I could meet my team. I could meet some colleagues. You know, I want to see these people. He did actually do that. I paid for it. And then eventually he gave me the money back, whatever it was, £900 or whatever it was for the flight. So yeah, we get to New York, and this is probably the most shocking part. I was still very excited, but Stephen was telling people we had a board, and he would use names like chairman and director, and coming from financial services, you know, I understand governance very well. And I was like, well, there's no entity. There was no legal entity at this stage, let alone appointing members to a board or etc. I was not a director. He was having business cards done. I mean, none of this had any legal structure behind it.
Right.
So I started to feel uncomfortable with that from a governance perspective. And when I got to New York, I met, trying to think what the organization that Florian works with, was very successful. But I met a few people who were on the other end, Choco for Peace.
Choco for Peace, yeah.
Chris from Evergreening Alliance, and there were others, I'm afraid I can't remember. But I got there and I witnessed something that made me, I just decided to start telling people actually that I think they should be worried.
Right, and what was that?
I couldn't go along with his story because I knew this stuff was still in its nascence. It was still conceptual. There was no ARC product. There was no software. There was no deals with massive retailers to sell jeans and then generate. There was no offsetting scheme. There was no technology in the background. You know, I knew from a project perspective, this was all in a conceptual stage. He was saying that it was launched, it was live, it was launched, it was functioning, and telling people that the money was coming. And I just felt really sorry for these people. I'm not from the NGO world. I'm not sure how much due diligence they do, but it sounds like if you can tell a story and protect, you know, convince people that you've got funds coming in, you are believed, to the point where they had I can't remember which conference it was, which part of the conference it was, but in the UN, they had a massive, you know, a massive room and a big session with a panel. I know Evergreening Alliance were on the panel. I can't remember the name of the organization but they had paid for those seats. You know, it costs, I don't know, I think I was told 15,000 euros for your slot. You know, so this is an NGO spending money. And Stephen managed to get a place on that panel on the stage. Someone filmed that, obviously, and that went straight onto his social media. So I felt very uncomfortable with him sitting there and telling the world that we had launched, the ARC had launched, and some massive numerical figures and money. And I thought, this is all wrong. So he'd promised them that this funding was coming, and I think they'd let him sit on that panel. And that gave him huge exposure, and to use that on his social media to convince people of his credibility. So I was so I did have a discussion with him afterwards. I said, I think this is all wrong, because it's not true what you're saying, and you're leading these people on. And I remember him saying to me, you don't understand how this works. They know how it works. This is how the game works, something like that. So then I started saying to people, whilst I was in New York, there is no board. The project isn't, you know, it's still, I just started being very transparent and saying to them, one NGO, I think it was Choco for Peace, were looking at the money he was promising them. They were going to go and take out personal loans in the very interim to cover, because, and he was going to sign a promissory note or something on behalf of the ARC when the legal entity didn't exist. And I was just going, don't do it, don't do it. I said, look, I'm a volunteer. Oh, you're not paid? No, I'm not. So I started just sort of sharing, and I thought, I don't really care what Stephen thinks. So that was probably the most crazy time that I've seen. You know, I've never seen anything like that in my life. Yeah.
Thank you, Sarah. And I guess that must have been quite difficult I can't get my head around that, in terms of promising an audience, of knowing the type of people that would be in that room, that funding is coming if you're an NGO. I mean, I think it exposes a system around the due diligence, which you touched on. And, you know, from my side, I was only ever told that you were just a volunteer, and that you slapped him an invoice and he was furious and all of this. But you know that.
Oh, no,
I know that's not true.
just to touch on that, and I guess just to finish my part, so if people know what was concluded in the end. I'm looking at the dates. It started in 2019. It went through to March 2021 with the chasing. I started at one point, I stopped, and I started chasing for money. And I took him through the Jersey Petty Debts Court process. Went as far as just before the final trial. It cost me time and money, and he did settle. I think I got about £11,000 or £10,000. He settled before I didn't go fully onto the trial like you had to do. You both had to do. So he did settle. But it was 2 years of my life. So yeah, it was. I don't know. It was just a horrible setback in the start of my sustainability career as well. It was emotionally draining.
No, absolutely. Thank you for sharing, Sarah. I really appreciate it. I'm just going to dive over to Sarah now in Tenerife. I can see your hair blowing in the wind. Please welcome and tell us a little bit about, I know your story is a little bit newer in terms of when you met, but same, I feel like I'm speed dating. Let us know a little bit about how you met, what happened, and where you are now.
Yeah, thanks, Rona. So I first encountered Stephen Fern at the beginning of last year. So this is 2023. And the ARC was still, this kind of ARC mission was still ongoing. And he was developing an online kind of remote what he pitched to me as a people's cop, you know, so like an online way that the global people interest, global politicians, everyone could come together and make collective decisions about how we get out of this mess. And that's something that really interests me. It's something that I'd thought about previously. And so he approached me to come on board as a program director for this online summit. And I was introduced to two other people. So this was called Arc Global Summit. And introduced to two other people who did this kind of event management as a living, so really experienced people. So they're automatically the trust is there. You're like, okay, these people know what they're doing, you know, they're working with him.
Yeah.
And so there's that sort of a confidence. It's ever so confident. And so I started similar to Sarah's experience, where you get those kind of messages of when you're coming on board full time. I was in a transition from leaving a nonprofit that I started. I just felt it was time. I'd been there for two or 3 years. It was time to try my hand at something different. I was really excited to start something new. And this ticked a lot of boxes. A big part of the experience and the value that I bring is this massive network of people in this sector. And he needed that to, you know, to get speakers onto the stage, speakers onto different panels. And yeah, essentially that was going to be my role. I left my full-time employment at the end of April and started officially on this ARC Global Summit, which again didn't have a legal entity until later. Yeah, to bring all of that together, bring all the content together, bring all the people together to try and create an alternative space where we can debate and deliberate and kind of come up with different solutions.
Yeah.
But it really didn't get very far.
So essentially you left a full-time job to come and work on this. And obviously you kind of started working. What then happened?
So the two other people that were doing the event management people had been on board for a little bit longer than me. And maybe in the second or third week that I'd been working full time on this project, they started to ask me, have you got a contract? Have you been paid? Are you being paid? And much like Ian and Sarah have expressed, actually there was an agreement to work, as a self-employed consultant position, but there wasn't an employer contract agreement in place, but there was written exchanges between us to kind of agree exactly what the role was and what would be the pay for that, the remuneration, and that prompted me to get extremely nervous very quickly. The fact that this other two people that were working on the summit had known him for, I think, since about 2010, maybe even early.
Yes.
They'd worked with him on an event many years ago. And so they were coming at it from a trust from a while back, a misplaced trust from a while back, assuming this is a solid person who's going to make good on their agreements. They did have a contract in place, but it never got signed. And that prompted me, in probably about the fifth week of doing that full time, to kind of really dig. I mean, it's what a fabulous lesson to learn really quickly. Is do some digging, do some due diligence. And I tried to find his previous companies that he'd started and dissolved on Companies House, and started to reach out to different people that were listed on there. And that's how I came across you. Thankfully, I came across.
Sorry about that.
No, it was much needed. I can't believe I could have wasted so much time. So it's all good.
Well, listen, it was from my point of view, it was super. It just took me right back when I got that call from you, May last year. I probably just so as the listeners know as well. Obviously, you left work, you started work. you've now also gone through the petty courts process in Jersey, is that right? So it's nearly a year on. What happened, and did because you've gone as far as a trial, which I believe is the very first time Fern has actually had to go stand up in court, and swear an oath. Because I know from what we've all found out, lots of people have either been paid off through mediation phase or assigned under NDAs. They can't talk about it. What happened with the judge? What was the decision?
So the judge actually ruled in my favor. It's taken a long, long, long time. And so it has to be said that even though my ordeal and my dealings with him were very short, I was really grateful to only have been interacting with him and working for him on this empty entity, the empty arc, I like to call it, for 2 months. But since then, so that takes us to the end of June. So from July until last month, it's just constant paperwork, constant process, constant paying out for different pieces of the process through the courts, revising, statements and getting legal documents signed. Absolute waste of time and money. But finally, thankfully, so I think it started you have to notify them. We can publicize the process hopefully somewhere so other people can follow it, but you have to notify them that they're going to court. Then you have to go to the first court to have it be accepted, then mediation, then no, we had the informal mediation, which you've probably spoken on your podcast about or written in other places. But finally, through to trial, which was a really new, weird experience for me. Never done anything like that before and never want to do it again. And then the beautiful joy at opening an email that said, actually, the judge has ruled in your favor. I was so sick to my stomach until I got that. I saw the headline, the subject, like, from Petty Debts Court or whatever for your trial.
Yeah.
And I couldn't open it. I was just so sick. But yeah, the relief. You can put it.
Well, listen. Kudos to you for Ian. I'm gonna bring you in. Kudos for you for following the process, and I can empathise with that, and having gone through it as well. Ian, please dive in now. You're still on mute, by the way. Are you coming in, Ian?
Yeah, sorry. I have to. It's going to take a while after I put my hand up. There's a bit of a delay because of the computer that I'm using. So, look, it's actually really heartening, but also really sad listening to all of the accounts for a number of reasons, because these are the individual examples of money that he owed to people, but I think it just scratches the surface, because just like the Tinder swindler, and he definitely should be mentioned in the same breath as the Tinder swindler, what he is brilliant at doing is working below the big thresholds so that he can escape the law. It's all petty debts, but the issue with me is it's not, because once you actually add together the impact that he's had across different industries, and I'll go on to the NGOs in a second, it gets into millions, genuinely gets into millions, but at such a big, huge volume, there's lots of thousands that get into millions, and it's a mixture of unpaid invoices and also wasted time. So and that is really, really important, because I have what's the word? Egg on my face, just like lots of others, because I've opened my network freely for Stephen, knowing that you need a network to be able to get charitable organisations up and running. Why did I do that? Well, you touched on it earlier, Sarah. He was in the United Nations speaking at a summit on behalf of organisations, and led the presentation on behalf of the Global Evergreening Alliance. It was recorded, and there was a round of applause at the end in New York. So why would you think it wasn't going to happen? Is what I would say when he's actually been able to get into that kind of forum and speak credibly. So that was one of the things that actually sparked me to open up my network. And I'd already introduced him to one of the founders of Earth Hour. So Earth Hour is a global initiative, and it was founded between WWF and their agency partner Leo Burnett at the time. And Andy Ridley, the founder of Earth Hour, he now runs a charity called Citizens of the Great Barrier Reef. And the clue's in the title. It's now focusing on mobilizing organizations and energy on addressing and helping to care for the Great Barrier Reef. And I knew Andy through Leo Burnett's, the agency that we both used, and we introduced Andy to Stephen, and Stephen presented at his board meetings.
Okay.
And he presented at the board meeting of the NGO of Citizens of the Great Barrier Reef with assurances that agreements were being signed and funding would be released to that organisation as a matter of priority. Now, remember, he presented to that board 2 or 3 times with a huge level of assurance, personal assurance, and spoke with clarity, and as a result, wasted so much time within that organization, because all of the stories that we are telling about our individual efforts, he has actually gone into NGOs and mobilized them also under false pretense. So genuinely, the invoices are a drop in the ocean, because having a team work on a bid full time for 2 months when they could be talking to legitimate businesses to help work on the barrier reef instead. That happened in that instance. He also worked very closely, obviously, because they allowed him to attend at the event in New York with the Global Evergreening Alliance. And I attended an event in Victoria, country Victoria in Australia, and he presented at the launch of the Global Evergreening Alliance, the ARC project. He presented them as partners, and
Right.
he specifically said, this was by video, but he specifically talked about all of the initiatives that were going to be funded through the ARC. And I can actually remember, because he was on, he was on screen when he was talking. He was obsessed with making sure that he was videoed, and
Right.
he kept asking me, and because what he wanted to do was to make sure that he was part of the press release from the Global Evergreening Alliance, and he would then use that with another NGO, and he would then talk about the fact that he was presenting at the board meeting of the Great Barrier Reef. He would then attend the climate summit in New York, and he would then use that. I got him an introduction to Paul Polman. He's probably the preeminent or leading progressive businessman in the FMCG space, ex CEO of Unilever, and a couple of different people helped him get into the Unilever boardroom. And Pullman then was at an event that Stephen was at as well. Stephen attended the event, and there was a picture of him with Paul Pullman holding a kind of globe.
Is this the black and white one, right? Where there's Paul Pullman,
right.
and there's a couple of big names in our sector, isn't it? And that got daubed all over the internet.
That's exactly right. So he got the photo of him, holding a world, if you like, the earth in their hands, which it was fair enough in Paul's case, because Paul and the other people at the event were invited to join together to actually tackle and address climate action, and somehow Stephen is then in the room with them, which then he can then post to his 900,000 followers on LinkedIn. But worse than that, he then takes that footage as endorsement from Paul Pullman, and that then gets him into Amazon board. It then gets him into University of Cambridge. It then gets him into Oxford University. It then gets him into, so through those false pretenses, he ends up opening a huge network, many of whom today still believe that nothing wrong has happened, that many of whom today still believe that you can't it was all with the best intentions, but it couldn't be further from the truth.
Ian, sorry just to cut you off there. Thank you so much for that, because I think it's touching on that, how someone grows to 100,000 followers based on pictures. I remember King Charles, Rowan Atkinson, all of these that turn out to be third, fourth, kind of touching around the edges. I'm conscious we haven't got much time, but I'd really like to bring both Sarahs back in. Sarah in Jersey, please dive back in with some extra thoughts.
Thanks. Yeah, Ian's just been triggering my memory. Couple of things to say. The other, building on what you've just said, Ian, just to throw another one in the hat, the other big thing that was done in New York was launching an initiative, Evergreening Alliance, launching Green Up to Cool Down. Now, they paid for a billboard in Times Square. So Stephen hot-footed over there and took a selfie in front of the Times Square billboard, Green Up to Cool Down, and then the social media, LinkedIn again. And can I just say, LinkedIn have a huge responsibility here for enabling this kind of stuff. And I feel very frustrated that there's no channel to deal with that through LinkedIn's own sort of governance. So I just want to make a point of that. But yeah, he then posted, "We have launched," always we, so as if he was part of Evergreening Alliance and he had funded the campaign totally on LinkedIn, and it was just getting thousands of hits, and I was just thinking, this is a load of rubbish. But yeah, so I think very clever at getting that picture, that soundbite, that thing, and then use it to go on. And the other thing was, I don't know which one, but one of the things he said to me in New York when he was running around was, "I've got to go meet so-and-so Rockefeller now for," name drop. I was just like, what? I just didn't know what to believe. But yeah, I just wanted to add that just add on about what other
Thank you, Sarah. I appreciate that.
Say one of the
Please.
things that's the motivation for doing things like this is because those pictures and those sound bites and those videos last in perpetuity online. Like you can search his name and only good things come up, and so that legitimizes it, that squashes any doubts that might have reasonably kind of cropped up, which would normally kind of be major red flags. But all of the stuff online is there forever, and that's the reason. And to continue on Sarah saying, LinkedIn definitely has an accountability and a responsibility here to do more. It's very hard for them to do so. I think I actually would suggest that the responsibility lies on a lot of other people, big names, big NGOs who have a bigger platform than the four of us to actually confirm that they have been, that their name is or isn't a part of Stephen's entity.
Yeah, absolutely. I think
they need to come forward and shed light on that. Once I kind of discovered this, and some of the names that he'd used in different WhatsApps to me and had in different posts, I had contacts in those companies and would go back at, or NGOs, and would say, like, do you know he's using what's the Earth shot? You know, do you know he's using your name here, and he's using the royal we? He's part of this. And unfortunately, people in positions of power within certain NGOs, they don't have the same sort of courage and autonomy to come forward. There's so much bureaucracy in those NGOs, you know, they can't be associated with someone like this, but unfortunately that's what it needs to break the silence on this. So my anger and dismay is actually not at the LinkedIn, because their law is quite clear. If he, you know, if he's done something illegal, they can take him down and shut down his profile. But until more people come forward to prove that this is fraudulent activity, actually that fraudulent activity is to give him credit where it's not due. Let's forget this is a leech who is Ponzi scheming his way through good people's time and money and good people's contacts. And that's all it is. He has nothing. There's nothing there. And the more people that can come forward like this will help us to expose it and to protect more people in the future.
Just on that as well, I did, and Rona will know, as our support group of, I want to say survivors rather than victims, but you know, has built, I did proactively contact then any names I could find from the original chat group and say, look, you know, we need to all speak out. And I've been really, really disappointed. And I understand some people have got their reasons, or they're scared, because he does send you intimidating emails, threatening. I had them leading up to when I was going into a courtroom for one of the sessions. And it can be intimidating, but still some of the bigger ones, I agree, Sarah, I've been really disappointed, the silence.
Thank you, Sarah. Listen, I'm really conscious. There's a fabulous company who are letting me use one of their rooms to record this, and I'm about to get kicked out. I might reach back out to you guys and see if we can block another 30 minutes out at some point. I know we all want to put a close to this, but even if I don't get round to doing that with you guys, thank you so much for your bravery, your voice, your fight through the courts or through lawyers. There's lots of MOs here, and I think that's what we need to understand. There's a gentleman that couldn't join today around 3C and climate crisis capital, so that's another element of funds coming in. So listen, thank you so much for joining today. Hopefully I can steal another 30 minutes from you and we can tag it on, but your bravery is amazing. It's been an absolute pleasure to know you all, and yeah, let's stay in touch, because I know we all will. Thank you.
Thank you.
Massive thank you to you, Rona. Seriously, you have given me so much strength and just determination. There's Tenerife for you. You're going crazy next door.
See you later.
Enjoy. Thank you so much.
All the very best.
Cheers.
Thank you, guys. Bye-bye.
Bye. Hi, James. Welcome to the second extended recording of the Rona Morale podcast. How are you?
You're all right. Sorry I couldn't do it last time and fit in with the group, but I can't even remember what it was now, but for some reason I couldn't. So.
Don't
worry. I'm here now.
Yay! It's a pleasure to have you. So for all the listeners, just as a quick introduction, James Atkins and I have known each other for maybe about a year now and been connected for a while. James is the founder and brains behind Planet League, Like Protein, and also Virtus Environmental Finance.
Co-founder, I would say, because I think there's few other brains behind them. But
as always, there's never just a one person with the idea.
yeah,
but
exactly.
James does some amazing work in the climate and environmental space, hence how we were connected and then how we subsequently kind of met. But essentially this is a carry on from the podcast, and so you'll see that I've changed clothes and I'm in a different location now if you're watching this on YouTube. But I've run out of time with the other guests that I had, both the Sarahs and Ian, and James now finally has been able to join us. So we're going to chat to James as well, and then also just for me to have a little bit of a say in terms of my experience as well. So this is really to close the loop, but the reason why James is ultimately here as well is that James has had a different experience from a different entity, if you like, of Stephen Fern and his different businesses. So, James, just tell us a little bit about how you met him and essentially how the story went and how it ended, I guess.
Yeah, so I think it was summer 2019, and he popped up on LinkedIn, and he had this great plan for a kind of B2C venture, which was creating these kind of carbon credits. So everything you do, everything you buy, you'd be offsetting your purchases and your lifestyle, and that would go to fund a sort of big global scheme for restoring, can't remember the number, but it's like 500 million hectares of land, like some big number. And I've been in this space for, I don't know, 15, as long as it's existed, really. And there was something about his ambition and directness and stuff, which I thought was quite refreshing. But obviously that was part and parcel of his game, as it turned out. Anyway, we got talking a few times we spoke a few times on the phone, and then he asked if we wanted to sponsor, or if we wanted, or I wanted to provide some sponsorship so that one of my projects could be promoted among his host of high net worth individuals and philanthropists who he swans around with in the Middle East and other places.
Right.
And this would get my project in front of people with money who want to invest in green things and stuff. And I thought, well, I don't have much access to very wealthy people, and so I thought that might be a useful angle. And he wanted I think six grand,
Right.
€6,000, something like that. Anyway, the story is, reasonably compelling in that he's got this bunch of wealthy people. They'll be seeing the project and be able to meet them and get introduced to them. But at the same time, he was very much in like startup mode, and he was getting stuff printed and stuff set up, and there was a incongruence which I sensed between the sort of lack of infrastructure that he had on one hand, but on the other hand, his sort of background in finance and his access to these people. And I wrote to a chap who I know in the carbon market and who had been a reference, who was provided as a reference of his. And I won't name the guy, but he's been a successful entrepreneur in carbon markets. And I wrote to him to ask him, what he thought of this guy. And for some reason, I didn't wait for the guy's reply. And he only actually, it turned out, replied quite some time later. I didn't know him. I didn't have his number. I didn't know him well enough to ring him up. I had his email and stuff. So I wrote him in. So, what do you make of this guy and stuff? And I don't know why. For some reason, I didn't wait till this guy got back. And I was actually talking to this is all sort of December 2019. I spoke to another colleague in the company, my company, and he said no, he doesn't trust the guy. Doesn't stack up. He's not going to provide any funding. And I thought, well, he's somebody in a very difficult market. He's trying to do something which is ostensibly very important. I'll give him the benefit of the doubt. If I lose the money, I lose the money. But at least I can say that. There's a funny thing. When I was at school, there was a chaplain, and the chaplain gave a talk, and it was a talk about not giving people money, needy people money.
Right.
And the statement was, "You never know who is Jesus." But this was a sermon at school when I was about 14. So you're walking along the street, someone in the street asks you for money, and you don't give it them. And it might have been Jesus. Perhaps you should have given him. Perhaps he was begging in the street. And unfortunately, this is the downside of going to a school where you go to chapel.
I don't really know what to say to that.
And this thought sort of, I wouldn't say it's on my mind all the time, but at a moment of doubt, where you say, do I give someone the benefit of the doubt, or do I play hardball and say, no, you're not getting my money? From time to time, I wouldn't say always, but from time to time, I just remember that little sermon, you never know which is Jesus.
Right.
Now, given that Stephen appears now to have some kind of God complex, and given that in Christianity, Jesus and God are one and the same thing, might not have been too far away. But
so, needless to say, then you did hand the money over.
I sent him some money, and I said, I need an invoice, and he gave me a poorly constructed invoice for half the amount. And to this day, 5 years, 4.5 years later, despite numerous requests, he's never provided a proper invoice for the other half of the amount.
What's the rationale for sending an invoice for half the amount when you'd already sent the full amount?
I think I sent 2 separate amounts.
Right.
That's what happened.
Okay.
So, and then, so that was sort of December 2019, and since then, obviously, I never got anything back from in terms of the proposed benefits of the sponsorship.
Did you get meetings? Did you get put in front of people? Was he like working?
No, it was always just. I mean, the thing is, I got busy and I had other priorities, so I didn't push it really hard. But obviously, even if I had, nothing would have happened, as we know.
Yeah. And were you on a website or something like?
No, I never even saw that. The impression I got was that we're always building, we're always, in startup mode. It's going to go live, And to be honest, the stuff that comes back to mind, it was but maybe in a couple of years later when he was launching, was it the capital? Was it climate capital? Yeah,
or climate crisis capital.
Yeah, one of those. And we haven't forgotten you. You'll be included in that. That kind of thing. But in the end, I could see that it wasn't going to go anywhere, and I just dropped it. And then what happened was that last summer, last summer, one of his colleagues, who latterly also got screwed by him, contacted me, asking me if I wanted to be part of. There was this big, what's it called? The village conference summit he wanted to do. It was originally planned, wasn't it? Originally planned for sort of last September or October, something like that.
Yeah, it was supposed to happen in November last year.
November last year, that's right.
Yeah.
And there was this extraordinary sort of 3D videos, virtual thing that he wanted to do. And we'd be featured on it, etc., etc. And initially I said, yeah, and then I thought, no way. And I wrote back and said, no, I don't want to be on this. Right. And that was when I spoke to I've forgotten the name of the lady. She and her husband who were working for him.
Oh, the Beehive, Jackie and Nick.
Yeah, Jackie and Nick. And I spoke to Nick, and Nick obviously knew what was going on, but couldn't talk to me about it. So I said, Nick, obviously this guy's a bit of a crook. You just got to be really careful who you're working with.
Right.
But obviously he knew that, but he wasn't in a position to sort of share with me that he knew that.
Was he asking you to pay more money, or okay, no, you can finally have a platform?
No, yeah, it was the platform. Have the platform, yeah, and perhaps even give a talk there, something like that. The aim being just have as many names on his roster on the website. I assumed, yeah. Okay. And then, so it's since then that I've been part of the group and seen all the stuff he's done to everybody. Yeah.
And so from your side of things, I guess some of the things I've heard and seen is that, this is a one-woman band, this is me going after, a character assassination, etc. And I guess in some ways that's why I brought different people together. But what would you say to people who go like you said at the time, he's just a guy trying to do the right thing, trying to make it happen.
Yeah, that's how I perceived it. Yeah.
Yeah, and as have lots, and as did I originally.
Yeah.
What do you say to those people about what you've seen and heard and over the years?
I think what you say is that the sheer number of people who've given him something, it could be time, money, sponsorship, donation, whatever, been dropped completely the moment that the money is transferred, and no consistent communication, no feedback, no evidence of progress.
Yeah.
The repeated claims that we see, you know, oh, we've just signed the $1 billion deal, the paperwork will be complete next week. You know, that little trope has been repeated month after month for several years now.
Right.
And so what I'd say is that it's all very well to have a fantastic idea and work your butt off for multiple years to make it happen, because, you know, anyone who's an entrepreneur in you know, the purpose space is in that boat.
It's brutal.
But you have to have your corporate infrastructure in place and really tight. You've got to have your company properly constituted. You've got to have, you know, your accounts properly done and audited and submitted to the authorities on time. If you claim to have a board, then, you know, those directors are registered directors, and you can find them on Company House. You know, so even the scrappiest startup has to be rigorously administered. And I think that's the difference between somebody who's a serious but unsuccessful entrepreneur and someone who's flighty.
Yeah, because I guess, like you say, you know, in this space, whether you're in this space or an entrepreneur, there's lots of us who've maybe had businesses or dissolved businesses. Some have worked, some haven't. We've invested somewhere, and in other places, it's been successful, and others it's epically failed. A bit going back to you never know who Jesus is, but the reality is there's always that. Follow the money, follow the resources, that paper trail, isn't there, to say this is kind of what happened. And
I think, you know, it's partly a thing about England. So because I live abroad and live and work in Hungary, where people are very skeptical, and there isn't any sense of initial trust when two people start meeting to do business. There's no assumption that you can trust them. Whereas in England, certainly in the past, there's often been in certain circles, you meet someone and you sort of trust them until you've got reason to distrust them, right? And so that can make people very lax in terms of, you know, me and you, both of us, we were lax in terms of paperwork, right?
100%. And you know,
and lax in terms of checking and so on, because, you know, Stephen has the right accent. He went to the same university as me, worked for the same firm as me at Arthur Andersen and stuff. So you sort of build in conversation those common points, and they create a deceptive sense that you can trust the person because they've got a similar background. You know, I know a little bit Port Vale Football Club, and he said his mum worked at Port Vale, you know, when he was younger. So these little points in common, if you're not careful, they build in you a sense of trust. Yeah. And that's really deceptive. So then I started thinking, oh, well, he's a guy I can identify with, therefore I can trust him. And that's a complete fallacy.
Yeah.
But if you have the sort of trusting upbringing I had, and lots of kind of middle-class English people did have, then, you know, you can get dragged into that.
And I think...
So, whereas, so you have to be doubly careful, you know, if you're of that disposition, you have to be doubly careful to make sure that everything's dotted and crossed and whatever, you know, your contracts are properly constituted and done.
Yeah, and I think that was a common thread of when I was speaking to the other guys. There was always a discussion of a contract, and there was maybe one drafted or one requested, but never signed. There was never that.
That's right.
You know, so
Well, I mean,
for a lot of people listening to this, they'd probably be like, "Oh my God, why did you get that far? Why did you do this? Why did you do that?" But like you said, when I first met him in back end of 2019, going into early 2020, I could see Facebook, could see the followings, could see some of the people he was supposedly or reportedly, working with and
with Prince
associating.
Charles and the Pope and all that, yeah.
I know, but when you say it out loud and you say it back, you go, well, this sounds
Bullshit.
like a red flag.
It
But it's like
it does.
little bits and bobs, and then you see some of the connections and you think, God, I actually really respect that person and that person.
Yeah, that's right.
It
but
ticks
Rona,
those boxes.
I think this is the anatomy of how frauds and fraudsters work. They know people's psychological flaws, and you get into a mindset where even though there's a red flag, for some reason your brain doesn't react to that red flag as it should. And you see it. There's that extraordinary internet Netflix series about that bloke who defrauded those two women, or
Tinder swindler.
Yeah, Tinder swindler. That's right. And the Bernie Madoff stuff. They're excellent psychologists, practicing psychologists. These people, and we don't, unless you have a really tough upbringing, you probably don't get schooled in dealing with those kind of people enough.
Yeah, and I think my journey was similar to yours. Met him, did a couple of podcasts with him about the ARC mission at that time, the 500 million and the coffee program, and then I started to work with him, and I worked for about 3 or 4 months working with projects in Ireland. I was bringing an investor in. All of these things were happening, and I had the same. This will be announced at the UN. He asked me to do COP20, whatever number it was. He was going to be in the blue zone, and this Canadian billionaire. But even 4 years on, and having gone through the court process, without a lawyer, I am pretty confident, had I have had the funds and had one, the outcome would have been very different, albeit it's still ruled in my favour.
Didn't you? You won your case against him.
But when you look at the legalities of things, and it's like the judge didn't hold him personally responsible, and there was a big discussion around him versus the CIC. But as you track and trace all his entities, they all get dissolved and then get renamed slightly different. So
yeah, they do. Yeah, and that's another absolute red flag of somebody who's up to tricks, isn't it?
Yeah, and like the judge said in the court, he was like, well, what are you the chairman of? And actually that you can't answer it. You must have a board to be a chairman. And I don't know if
chairman of a board.
Yeah, exactly. And it's misrepresenting the scale that you are, the connections that you have.
Yes. But I suppose the other problem is that we've seen with the journalists who you've spoken to and so forth, is that when all is told, the actual number of pounds that he's deprived people of is probably less than £1 million, right?
Yeah.
And the police and the SFO, who don't seem to be very successful at fraud stuff anyway, they go after people who are dealing with hundreds of millions or tens of hundreds of millions and stuff. So it's a space which isn't well covered by the law anyway.
Yeah, and I think for a lot of people, there's a lot of people who haven't wanted to speak up, certainly wouldn't want to come on the podcast, but have been involved in the WhatsApp group of varying degrees of issues, from never receiving a refund when asked, even though he's publicly claiming he will, to people who've had to send him things like cease and desist because he's using things like Rowan Atkinson, Prince Charles. But you and I both know that even still to this day, and even when I was in the courtroom, he's still going on about the Pope and King Charles.
You know, people are funny, right? So you can be talking to someone who's got completely different political views from you, right? And you can't believe that they believe it, but they do, and they believe it as earnestly as you believe your political views, right? You go and talk to a Trump supporter in Idaho or whatever, he will, or he or she will be absolutely, genuinely believing their reality, right? And I think there's a sense in which Stephen actually believes his version of the story. He believes that he's doing a good thing, and he believes that we're just pesky people bothering him, and he believes that that he's just around the corner from saving the world. And it could. So there's a point at which I kind of think, well, you know, it's not about beating up on him. It's about, you know, he needs to, but he get some help from somebody.
Yeah, there is
I
that.
don't know him from Adam, so I mean, it's not for me to tell him to go and get help, but somebody close to him should.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I've only met the man face to face, and sadly, both times were in the court environment. But I think, I think there's something to be said of lots of areas, the system. So from everything from the SFO to the police were looking into things, and then you've got LinkedIn, who their ruling is you've got to break the community rules before we kick you off.
Well, it was that Funder guy, wasn't there? What was it? Funder Beam or Venture Beam or something?
Yeah, I mean, they've now changed their name.
Give a toss about whether he'd got people who weren't really, you know, proper trying to raise funds on their platform. I thought that was really weird.
And considering they were in the financial services and they were not willing to do any due diligence at all.
I don't think you can get away with that, to be honest. I think that if you look at the rules on AML and stuff and financial services, then I think they're pretty strict. So
maybe that's why they've changed their name. I don't know.
Well, I don't know. I don't know anything about them. It was just an observation.
Yeah.
But so these platforms and stuff, they don't seem to take. I suppose it's about time and money, isn't it? Because to take responsibility for something, to actually check into the background. So, I know that in the financial sector, if you want to do proper anti-money laundering checks and know your customer checks, it is time-consuming and difficult. And if LinkedIn always had to check the veracity of everything on their platform, it wouldn't exist as a business because it wouldn't be viable.
And actually, it's interesting you say that as well about the kind of money laundering. So I remember when the whole Rhino project was out there back in, it was probably before you and I met. It was like March, April, May of last year. And I thought, he's raising funds for these rhinos. And
I remember that.
And I remember when the family actually then sort of started to say, well, okay, just send me the legal team, send me the banking. And I need you to fill this form out, because essentially there's a certain form you have to fill out in South Africa for money laundering. And he just wouldn't fill it out. And they're going, well, why won't you fill it out? I mean, that's for another time, another story, I guess, the Rhino situation. But again, people are handing over money to somebody without even a business bank. I found out in court that the Wise bank that he has is just a personal account.
Just a personal one.
There's no business set up, and people are handing over tens of thousands of euros to fundraise for something that I will have to, I guess, essentially write about this, but not all the money. In fact, none of the money, I can tell you that now, none of the money actually went to the Platinum Rhino family and the organisation. Wow. It did go somewhere else, a fantastic cause, but there were still funds, not all the money. And actually, when he publicly announced that the money had been sent over to this other organisation and that it was matched by his matching donor, it absolutely wasn't, because I know exactly how much money went. So there's that risk about who we're handing money over to as well, as a man with no business bank account, no accounting, and
I
you know,
suppose that, in this post-truth world where, people like Boris Johnson are quite happy to tell porkies all the time, again, we get a bit inured to Stephen. We're less shocked by Stephen's relationship with truth.
yeah, and you know what? I think, from the founding members who each gave £250 to the rhinos to there's been so many different, race to net zero. There's been so many things, but not one single account filed anywhere for anything. And I think what's really shocked me beyond anything is the level of nastiness that he has emailed threats to myself, to Sarah, to my family. I've seen some of the things he said about me to others and about other people.
Yeah. Well, I think, that's a really nasty bit, and it's completely. I mean, even if let's say someone is a fraudster, they don't have to be nasty to people about it, right? So it's kind of separate. You can, and I've seen those mails and the sort of vitriol in them, and that's not very nice at all. It's just horrible, and it must be awful to be on the receiving end of it.
Well, listen, I know that there's a million things that I want to say, but you know what? I'm honestly, I'm genuinely quite drained and tired from the whole. Certainly this last 12 months, but even when it all kicked off for me before. But
you've done an amazing selfless thing, really, by trying to galvanize everybody, get them, rally people around this. I think it's yes, I mean, that is an amazing thing, but there's a point where you've got to draw the line and say, right, I'm going to finish the Stephen Fern story and not worry about it anymore. Otherwise it'll damage your mental health to start. So it's really important to get, and I think getting the judgment in the court is a good point in time for closure, really. I think that's a great achievement.
Yeah, I think for both Sarah and I, and the other Sarah, who, his MO is to kind of pay up before going to court or go through mediation. It's a bit like a numbers game.
Must have run out of money then, wasn't it?
Well, there's obviously there's three of us now with a court order against him, plus another one. The bailiffs are involved. So there's a lot going on, but this was never about the money for me. This is about exposing something that was fundamentally wrong in our sector. And I was blown away by the number of people that have direct messaged me, obviously not necessarily in the WhatsApp group, but and other stories where it's triggered someone to do more due diligence and therefore hopefully helped.
Avoided losing money.
But this will all be soon forgotten. He's essentially small fry, like you alluded to earlier.
Yeah, he is. And
I just hope that it gives courage.
It's the fact that it's small amounts of money. Hello? It's small amounts of money. Therefore, it's really difficult for people to commit the time to get redress. Because, how much time are you going to spend to recover £250 membership fee? Just have to write it off. So you've got 1,000 people writing it off. You're all right.
Exactly. And even the civil courts process, there is no accountability. When it comes to it, because of the new human rights, you can't force bankruptcy. You can't send anyone to prison. So the fact he's been here over 24 times, he can just keep doing it. There is zero, and that's just what we know of. There's probably more, but
that's just in Jersey, right?
Yeah.
So court awards in Jersey.
If I was to add up all the people who've messaged and then all the NGOs, and there's some big names in there who won't come forward, and I understand why. But I think, like Sarah said, standing on a stage at the UN, promising millions ready to invest. I mean, it's what's.
But what do you lose? What do you lose by just saying what happened by coming forward? What does somebody lose by it? But yeah, it's a bit embarrassing that you were daft a few years ago, but like we all make mistakes, don't we? There's nobody who doesn't make mistakes. I bet David Beckham misses a penalty. So what? He scores most of the time. It's fine.
Yeah, the only trouble is the poor sod suffered for that for a few years afterwards. But it's even for me, it's on record. The judge saying, "I said I made a stupid mistake. My paperwork was crap. I believed in the cause.
Mistakes.
It was COVID. The sun was out. I was like, oh my God, this is an amazing mission. I've got 6 months off. Let's get involved." And look, at the end of the day, I just hope that this gives more people courage who have got invoices or haven't been paid, that you can follow the system. The system's brutal, but reach out to me if you like. All of us did it without a lawyer, and we still won our cases. So whatever his narrative is now going forward, frankly, I don't care. I just, thank you.
Well, I've
for
said
coming
to
forward
him
as well.
I've said to him privately on a couple of occasions, Stephen, if you came clean on this, even now, you would gain the respect of a lot of people who respect you don't have at the moment, and you could actually do something really good of the amazing skills you've got, because there's no doubt he's got a lot of great skills. But it's just that used badly. Like Putin's a very skillful chap, but he's using his skills badly. I mean, not that I'm comparing him with Putin, but it's a bad example.
Oh, don't worry, because he compared me to Putin. Apparently, I'm like Putin, so you can talk about Putin.
My battery's getting very low now, Rona.
Right.
So I better
listen,
jump off. But nice to talk.
James, thank you so much for coming on and kind of being vulnerable as well. It's awesome to chat to you. And take care, and hopefully we'll meet soon as well.
Yeah, sometime. Yeah. Cheers then.
Take care. Bye. Bye. I'm just going to carry on talking a little bit. So James has gone now, and I just wanted to bring a different story that was bringing in climate crisis capital to all of those that have come forward on the video or have been through the court process or have messaged privately or commented openly. I think there's so much that has been learnt through this process around how LinkedIn works, how the system works, how the civil court system works, and actually when it all boils down to it, how much accountability, when you follow the process of fair and just kind of results. We know from latest emails and everything that's going on, this individual will not stop. He's still signing off emails as a chairman. He's still talking about the royal we. That we are all going to be hugely surprised, but that he's got funding for the next 5 years for the mission. But we've all got emails and text messages saying this from literally 5-10 years ago. So if there's anybody else out there listening, if there's anybody who can make sure that they do their due diligence, that's all we can ask, and that's all we hope that this proves. As for the announcement that's going to happen in September, apparently, with the UN announcing his 5-year funded mission, where we will all be hanging our heads in shame, there's part of me that goes, do you know what? If you get that funding for 5 years, amazing. We would all be thrilled. You can pay your debts, you can pay people off, and honour what you've committed, honour those invoices, honour the work, honour the commitments and promises that you've made to multiple NGOs, and they would all be thrilled. This isn't about stopping a vision or something for the planet. This was always about truth, honesty, and making sure that what was being said versus what was actually happening has come to light. So anyway, this is the last time I'm going to be talking about Stephen Fern, and it's the end of May, and it's time for me to close the door on this. Of course, if anyone ever wants any help, please do feel free to reach out, but essentially I'm done. It's been a 4-year fight. with a bit of a gap in the middle, until I found that he was still doing this from a year ago, after a very distraught phone call with someone. So I've learned so much from this. I'm so tired. Yeah, I just can't thank everyone enough who was in the support group. You know who you are, and you're all doing incredible things. So that's something amazingly good that has come from this. And I'm super proud to have got to know you as well. So that's it. Over and out. Take care.
So that's it. You've made it. The show's over. Thank you for being with us. I hope you've been able to take something away, maybe solve a problem, or just know you're not alone. Here's hoping it made you smile with a few laughs along the way. Please feel free to find me on all social media channels, and you can subscribe to my YouTube channel. Just search the Rona Morale podcast. Have an awesome day and see you next time.